Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Phoenix's Tale. I am your host, Gabe, and this week we are talking about Chapter 7, The Boggart in the Wardrobe. But we got to get to our recap first. So, Draco Malfoy, it turns out, is playing up his injury from Buckbeak's attack from last week in order to get Hagrid fired. He also seems to know something about Sirius Black and Harry, but refuses to say anything to Harry about it. Ron begins to notice something strange going on with Hermione, and we experience their first defense against the dark arts class with Professor Lupin. In this chapter, they're dealing with a Boggart, which is, according to Hermione, a shapeshifter. It can take the shape of whatever it thinks will frighten us most. So the class takes it in turn to face the Boggart, with Neville being the first to do so. The chapter ends with Harry and Hermione feeling a bit put out that they didn't get to face the Boggart, with Ron wondering aloud if Hermione's Boggart would be a piece of homework that only got 9 out of 10. I do love Ron's sassiness. So, before we dive into our discussion this week, I've got a couple things that I want to go over. The first, of course, being the first episode of March, we are going to celebrate the March birthdays for our characters. We have the one and only snarky Ron Weasley on March 1st. We have Hufflepuff Ernie Macmillan on March 6th. We have Professor Trelawney herself on March 9th. We have Remus Lupin himself on March 10th. We have James Potter, Harry's father, on March 27th. And even though we haven't met him yet or his daughter, we have Ted Tonks on the 31st of March. So, last week when I ended the episode, I teased something about this chapter with Professor Lupin that has entertained me for quite some time now. So we're going to talk about that, because this is just something that really cracks me up. And this is for those of you who already know the story. So my apologies if this is a spoiler alert for you. I'm not going to go into too much detail, because those of us who know the story know exactly what I'm talking about here. So hopefully I don't give away too much for those of you reading along as you're listening to this podcast and reading along for the first time. So, given what we know about the connection between Lupin and Snape, you just know that Lupin, after hearing that Professor Snape is the thing that frightens Neville the most, specifically had Neville imagine Snape in Neville's grandmother's clothing. I mean, come on. Okay, most of you know who Remus's best friends were when he attended Hogwarts roughly 20 years previous. And this just seems like the thing that Lupin would do. He's, as we get into the series, learning more about him, about his best friends from school, and his dislike of Snape when they were in school together. You know that Professor Lupin just could not help himself. He did that intentionally. So, anyway, that part just amuses me to no end, because, like I said, you know Lupin did that one on purpose. Anyway, so we're going to talk about Boggarts this week, but we're going to approach this from a different perspective. A few episodes back, we discussed that when we're in trauma or long-term survival mode, our nervous system cannot tell the difference between a real threat and a perceived threat, with a perceived threat being anything new or different from our current baseline setting. Instead, we're going to talk about some ways that we can combat our own Boggarts in the real world. So we're going to talk a bit about using humor as a healing tool. And we're going to break this down a bit. So, why does laughter help our bodies? Laughing shifts the body out of high threat mode, even briefly, by loosening tight muscles, softening our breath, and interrupting the stress response. That shift does not erase the problem. I want to be very clear on that, but it does give the nervous system a micro reset so that we can think more clearly and feel less trapped in our trauma, in our struggles, in our survival mode. Humor is also a nervous system regulator. When we find something genuinely funny, our attention moves, even for a moment, away from scanning for danger and towards connection, play, creativity, etc. This is why, especially if you're with friends, this is why a shared laugh, hard conversations. Oh, I read that wrong. Sorry. My notes are a little skewy. This is why after a shared laugh with friends, hard conversations or scary tasks can feel 10% more doable. The body is slightly more regulated, which means more access to choice and clearer thinking. Using ridiculous as reframing, not denial. So the spell doesn't delete the Boggart. It changed how it appears, making it less overwhelming and more workable. Which is why Professor Lubin had them think of something to make the Boggart less scary to each of the students. In the same way, healing humor doesn't say this isn't serious. It simply says that I can hold this stress, trauma, whatever, but also find a tiny bit of lightness so that stress, trauma, etc. doesn't swallow me whole. And then we have harmful versus helpful humor. Helpful humor is gentle, compassionate, usually aimed at the situation or the absurdity of being a human, the absurdity of the situation itself, and it leaves the nervous system feeling softer. Harmful humor is sharp, it is shaming, it is punching down, including doing this to ourselves, and it leaves the body feeling tighter, smaller, and more ashamed. We're going to dive into this one a little bit more too in future episodes, because growing up, I was told, because I'm highly sensitive, among other things, I got the harmful humor. And then I was ridiculed and shamed for being so sensitive to it, when it was really fucking cruel, to be perfectly honest with you. So, got some experience with that. So let's unpack some of the psychological and physiological effects that laughter and humor do help us with when needed. So we're going to revisit the list I just made, but we're going to get into the psychological and physiological effects. So, why laughter helps the body? Laughter triggers the vagus nerve, which acts like a brake on the sympathetic nervous system, which is where fight or flight resides, for lack of a better term. This increases heart rate variability, which is a marker of nervous system flexibility, and releases endorphins and oxytocin. It boosts nitric oxide in the body, which dilates blood vessels and improves oxygenation, literally helping you breathe easier when feeling trapped by fear. Humor as a nervous system regulator. The neuroscience angle of this is humor activates the prefrontal cortex, which is about planning and perspective taking specifically, while temporarily quieting the amygdala, our fear center. It's like flipping a switch from immediate danger, red alert, to I got this. Shared laughter creates neural synchrony. Brains literally start firing together. which is why group laughter feels so bonding and regulating. And this mirrors Professor Lupin's classroom, where everybody is facing their fears together and then laughing together when the Boggart changes to the not scary version. So when Professor Snape comes out of the closet, the Boggart Snape, which is why Professor Lupin had Neville imagine Snape in his grandmother's clothing and why the whole class laughed. The 10% more doable idea that I mentioned earlier, that's a state-dependent memory. When your nervous system shifts even slightly, you remember past successes more easily instead of just past failures. State-dependent memory, state-dependent learning is interesting. I need to write this down because, here we go. Okay. Sorry about that, but I had an idea for, there are several places throughout the series we can talk more in depth about state-dependent learning. It's awesome. So, ridiculous as reframing and not denial. So we're going to talk about some of the cognitive and somatic layers here. So, this is cognitive diffusion, which is part of ACT therapy. Is a concept of ACT therapy. And since we are right here, ACT therapy. So, acceptance and commitment therapy. That's what ACT stands for, is an action-oriented psychotherapy that fosters psychological flexibility to help individuals live meaningful lives despite inevitable pain. Rather than suppressing difficult thoughts or feelings, ACT uses mindfulness, acceptance, and value-driven behavior to change one's relationship with discomfort. Okay, so this is cognitive diffusion, which is the ACT therapy concept. Creating distance between you and the fear story so it has less grip on you. The Boggart doesn't vanish. It just loses its terrorizing costume, in other words. Somatically, reframing through humor interrupts the fear cascade. So the racing heart, the shallow breath, the tunnel vision, the I'm going to die thoughts. Laughter breaks that loop at the bodily level first, which is awesome. And a quick note on J.K. Rowling's genius in this is that Neville's Boggart Snape in Grandma's clothes isn't fake. It's still scary because it's still Professor Snape underneath all of that. But healing humor honors the real fear while making it survivable. And speaking of helpful humor, let's dive into the helpful versus harmful humor. And we're going to make the distinction a bit more visceral for you here. So helpful humor feels expansive in the body. Our chest opens, breathing deepens, and our energy starts to flow a little better. It's usually self-accepting. For example, wow, humans are such messy creatures. Or situational. Life keeps throwing me curveballs. It's a good thing I brought my comedy back. It's lame. ChatGPT came up with these ideas because I needed to understand this to explain it to you. But I'm sticking with it. Harmful humor, on the other hand, just like I mentioned, the kind of humor my father would engage in, disguising insults and attacks as, I was just joking, contracts the body. The stomach knot, your stomach knots, your shoulders hike up. It's self-attacking. I'm such a loser. Or it's other blaming, meaning everyone's an idiot. Or toxic positivity. Oh, just laugh it off. My father's so-called humor was definitely harmful humor. I do want to make a note here real quick about different cultures here. I know that not everyone's humor lands the same way with one another. What feels playful to one nervous system, mine for example, might feel dismissive to somebody else because of whatever trauma history they might have, whatever cultural differences there might be in humor itself and in handling trauma. So I just wanted to take a note that whatever works for you, whatever makes you laugh, roll with it. Because we're going to talk about me personally. And this is something that I noticed in myself with this shift. I talked about this shift that I've been going through over the last couple months. But it really started happening for me a couple of years ago. And it started in earnest in April of 2024 when I saw a post on TikTok that had me laughing so fucking hard that video replayed multiple times before I scrolled on because it was so goddamn funny. And oh my God, I was in tears. I was laughing so hard. I was literally howling with laughter. And it was the first time that I realized that I had had such a good laugh that I was able to see for the first time just how long it had been since I experienced a genuine belly laugh like that. You know, I'm in tears. I can hardly breathe. I look like that demented seal, joke that you hear about. I thought this thing was fucking hilarious. But it helped me see that having that laugh that particular evening, I'm surprised I didn't wake the house up because it was kind of late. I was in bed, final scroll of TikTok for the night. There's this post, and I'm just laughing my ass off. Surprised I didn't wake the house up. But ever since then, when I realized that I had been missing genuine laughter in my life, I have been, for lack of a better term, collecting content creators whose content does make me laugh. And with that level of honesty, in drawing out a genuine laugh from me, my current favorite being Rockstar, who does all those amazing animal voiceover videos. He's really good at that. Anyway, in short, I've been doing what I can to watch, to read anything, listen to anything that gives me a genuine laugh that I find genuinely funny, because it does feel so much better to laugh than to be stuck in that negative rumination and, oh, nothing's ever going to get better for me, everything sucks, whatever is going on. I do feel better getting genuine laughs or experiencing genuine laughs. So I highly, highly, highly urge you to do that yourself. Again, in whatever way works for you. You don't even have to share your more off-color humor, what you find funny. You don't have to share it. Just enjoy it. Just have that good laugh. But I highly encourage you to look for ways to experience genuine laughter again, if it has been a long time, because that will, as we've talked about in this episode, help regulate your nervous system. On that note, we're going to wrap up for the week. Next week, we'll discuss Chapter 8, The Flight of the Fat Lady. Until then, again, do what you can to have a good laugh. And I'll see you next week.